Hello everybody, I'm Spencer with Game Nerdz, and in this crowdfunding preview, sponsored by Red Raven Games, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Above and Below Haunted to help you determine if it's the kind of game you should back. Now, big disclaimer here, this is a demo preview copy, so the components and design elements are not final. Everything that you see here is not the finished product, so be sure to check out the crowdfunding page for all of those complete details. All right, let's get into going over the game objective and explaining what you're doing thematically in Above and Below Haunted. Now, this is a competitive village building game of exploration and spookiness. A little bit of spookiness, I suppose. Now, Above and Below Haunted is actually a completely standalone sequel to Above and Below, which is actually set to release on the 10th anniversary of this guy right here. Now, as the story goes, you and your family have lived in the marshlands for generations, but your hometown is getting a little bit crowded. You've heard of a new land of opportunity where you can start a new life of catching fish, living in a stilt house on the lake, and exploring the deep sinkholes for rare ingredients and rusty treasures. If only you'd known about the ghosts, you might have stayed where you were. Now, though it is a thematic sequel, you don't have to have played Above and Below or any of the other blank and blank games, but more on how it compares to those games in just a bit. In the game, 2 to 4 players compete to build the best village by recruiting villagers, constructing buildings above, and exploring the caves below. All right, let's break down how the game plays out. Above and Below Haunted is played over the course of 7 rounds, though there is a variant for a longer game that lets you play 8 rounds. Each round has an actions phase and an end of round phase, which is kind of like an upkeep phase. But let's talk about what you can do in an actions phase. If you've played Above and Below, many of this is going to sound very familiar to you. The first action you can do is explore. You need to explore because that's how you're going to get the cave cards that allow you to build new buildings in your village. Without those cave cards, you can't build any more buildings. The way that works is you commit 2 or more of your villagers to go on an exploration, and you're going to move them over to show that you've used them. Then you choose if you want to go for a regular cave or a more difficult cave. Once you choose which cave you're going to go after, you'll roll a die, and that will tell you which story entry you'll turn to in the storybook. Now, in this preview copy, I didn't have a fully finished storybook. In fact, the one that I have is a printout. So this is what we had to work with, but just so you know, this is the one from Above and Below. You can expect the encounter book for Above and Below Haunted to look something like this, with a spiral bound edge. I don't want to spoil any of the text that's going to be in the game itself. Basically what's going to happen is you go in the storybook to the encounter that you rolled for, and you're presented with a paragraph. Here is the very first one, and it says, "You find a strange cocoon." That's it. Now, most of them are much more descriptive than that. There's more story going on, but you're presented with some text, a little bit of context of what's happening to help you inform what you want to do from that point on. So this one says, you can either open it or destroy it. Now notice there's Explore 5 or Explore 3. Those are the skill tests, essentially, that you have to do, and the higher number is more difficult to overcome. The more villagers that you commit to the exploration, the better your chances are of rolling a success. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how all that plays out, but just know that the more villagers you have and the more strength that they have, the better your chances are of completing a task. Depending on your outcome, you're going to go to a follow-up paragraph that will tell you what happens, along with potential rewards with what you have done. Some of the rewards you can expect are some resources, some coins, maybe even a mystic brew. Maybe you'll even gain a squid root token. But in addition to those rewards, you also gain the cave card, and this is where you're going to be able to build buildings on top of in your village. Speaking of, that's the next action that you can do, build. You will need to exhaust a villager with a hammer to then choose a building that you can afford. Here's the cost. And then again, make sure you have an empty space, a fresh cave card that you can build on top of. The next action on the player board is to banish, which is new in this version. It has to do with the ghosts. I'll get to that here in just a bit. After that, The next action you can do is to hire. You'll exhaust a villager that has a feather, and then you could come over here to the available villagers and pay their cost. If they are the lower cost villagers, notice here, they're going to come with a ghost because they took the easier path, but it's the more haunted path. So whenever you do that, you get a ghost in your village. Finally, the last action printed on the board is to labor, which actually combines the harvest and labor action that you had in above and below. Here, you'll exhaust a villager, gain a coin, and then you can take goods from any of the buildings that you have that have goods on them. If you exhaust a villager with a hammer icon, you can actually harvest 2 of your goods. Now, this advancement track is huge because as you gain goods, you're going to fill that up with unique goods, and that's going to impact your income every round, as well as your final score at the end of the game. Now, there are a few free actions you can do on your turn that don't cost a villager, such as putting something up for sale, buying something from another player, refreshing the building row, and something else that's new, using a boat token. You'll gain these in different ways, such as from an exploration, but when you get a boat token, it goes down along with your villagers. You can exhaust it to either get an automatic 6 when you roll, or gain a coin. Now, players will take turns doing single actions. You'll go around the table until everybody passes, which means either until you can't do any more actions because you don't have any more available villagers, or you just choose to pass. Once everyone passes, you go to the end of round phase, which is essentially the upkeep phase, where you'll collect income, villagers rest, and ghosts haunt. Speaking of, I want to get a little bit more specific about what's different in Above and Below Haunted than its predecessor. Ghosts will haunt your buildings, which causes your reputation to go down at the end of every round. For every ghost you have on a building, your reputation drops 1 space. Your reputation will impact your final score at the end of the game. That's why the banish action is so important. When you do the banish action, you remove all of your ghosts, but you can put one of them on one of your opponent's buildings, then gaining a reward depending on what type of building you placed it on. That adds a little bit more player interaction that others may have felt were missing from the first version. Just remember that in order to do this, you have to have a villager that has the feather icon. I pointed out earlier that there are 2 different cave types you can go in, basic or dangerous. The dangerous caves have a higher risk, but they also have a higher reward, including gaining a pearl as long as you pass the encounter. Pearls will be placed on your highest good on the advancement track at the end of the game, thus giving you more points. Also want to quickly recap the harvest and labor action being combined, that's new. The boats, that's new. And then here's what's really cool, 40 adventure cards. Now you might gain these as a reward whenever you do an explore action. And just without giving too much away, here's a giant moth. And so it has a once per round ability, return 1 of your ghosts to the supply if you do gain a reputation. That's great, that's game changing. So where is that giant moth? I don't know. You have to explore to find it. There's also Mystic Brew, which essentially replaces cider and potions from the original game. And finally, there's a little bit of a rules change when it comes to explorations. In Above and Below, you had to pass the encounter, you had to be successful essentially, in order to gain the cave card. In Haunted, you go ahead and get the cave card anyway, even if you fail the exploration. So that about does it for all of the nitty-gritty of the game, but let's get into a few considerations. Number 1 is the time commitment. How much time will you need to play this game? First of all, let's break it down. It's going to take you about 10 minutes to set this up. There are a few, real specific things you have to do, like setting out the key cards and the star cards and specific placements for everything. So yeah, if you're setting this up by yourself, it takes you about 10 minutes to do that. Also, to explain the game, especially to someone brand new, it'll take you about 7 to 8 minutes. If you've played Above and Below, if everyone's familiar with that, you can easily jump into this with just a few minutes of, here's what's new, here's what's different. All right, let's go. Now, each round can average anywhere from about 5 to 10 minutes, and that's based on a number of factors like the number of players, how many workers you have, and the explorations that happen. And in fact, later rounds in the game are going to take longer because as you gain more villagers, more workers, whatever you want to call them, they then allow you to do more things. Considering all of that, for an entire playthrough, the 1 to 2 hour estimate provided by the publisher is pretty accurate. Of course, a 2-player game will be on the shorter end of the spectrum, whereas a 4-player game will be on the longer end. As for cleaning up the game, if you wanted to, you could just throw everything in the box, and that'd take you about 15 seconds. But if you really want to carefully organize all your components, like I know that you want to, it's going to take you probably about 6 or 7 minutes. All in all, you can expect to set aside 1.5 to 2.5 hours to play Above and Below Haunted. One other thing to consider, which again, if you've played the original, this is going to be familiar to you, it does take up quite a bit of table space because you have to lay out all of these cards. This is a 5x5 foot table, just for reference, so keep that in mind. Make sure you've got a big enough table to be able to play it. All right, now let's talk about who this game is for. What is the target audience? Well, if you've played Above and Below, as I've said many times, and you like that game and you want more of that game, this is for you. There's not really anything too significant that is changed here. If you like that system, this is just more of that. Of course, the addition of the ghosts is nice. It really changes things up. But if you like the basic mechanics and the minimal story elements of the original, this is just more of that. If you love it, you're going to love this. Also, for fans of all Red Raven games, especially games set in the land of Arzium, this is just more of that. More lore, more adventures, more characters that you may have seen in other games show up here. It's just a nice little continuation of all of that. There's just enough there to continue to immerse you into that world. However, it's not so directly connected that you need to have played any of those games. This is a perfect jumping in place to the world of Arzium. Now, if you've never played any other Red Raven games, here are some non-Red Raven games that are a little bit similar to this as far as what the game does. First of all, Tales of the Arabian Nights. You kind of see this as there's a game going on, but the narrative, the story element is adjacent to that. So you have that going on in Tales of the Arabian Nights. Vagrant Song, Dead of Winter, or any of the other Crossroad games, Legacy of Dragonholt, really anything that uses a narrative choice / paragraph as a complementary mechanic rather than the sole focus of the game is going to give you a similar feeling. The encounters don't get in the way of the gameplay, but that means some people may want more than a paragraph. So if you want something that's more in-depth, more detailed in a game, then this may not give you exactly what you're wanting. However, I do think Haunted does go a little bit further to making those choices have bigger impacts through the use of the adventure cards that I showed you earlier. The suggested age range is 8 and up, and I do think that that fits. There's nothing too mechanically complex, and the younger players will certainly get a kick out of seeing how their choices play out. But at that age, I'd expect them to get more excited about the explorations and just kind of tolerate the village building and resource management aspects. I would also probably put this game in the cozy game category. The skill checks are really simple to execute, and the stakes are low enough that you can just enjoy building your village and have the occasional encounter that sprinkles the narrative elements in. All right, now let's get into the crowdfunding details. Everything you need to know about what's going on through this campaign. Now, each copy of the game comes with a free stretch goal box that includes all unlocked stretch goals. Now, this will be exclusive to the campaign, only provided from Red Raven Games. So if you don't want to miss out on that, you definitely want to back it. The initial stretch goals revealed at the publication of this video are metal coins like the ones you see here, wooden boats. Wouldn't it be cool to have, wouldn't it be cool to have wooden versions of those little boat tokens? Grasskin villagers, 2 cafe buildings, a solo mode. If you want to play it solo, they're going to make that possible, and wooden reputation tokens to replace the cubes that go on the reputation board. The campaign will also offer upgrades for the original Above and Below, including metal coins, a solo mode, and other deluxe components. By the way, this campaign will launch on October 8th, and if you go follow it now, you can get a free gift, a Rubyfish first player figure to use when playing Above and Below Haunted. You can check out the campaign and follow it now for your free gift by heading to our short link, nerds.me/haunted. And that's everything I wanted to cover about Above and Below Haunted. Hopefully this video gives you the info you need to decide if you want to support the campaign. If you have any questions about anything I did or didn't say, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Also, if you're interested in picking up the OG Above and Below or any other games from Red Raven, just head over to GameNerdzd.com or click the links I've put in this video's description. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on other tabletop gaming content like this. Once again, my name is Spencer, and I want to thank you so much for watching.